Good evening, Santa Cruz County. Welcome to Voices from the Village, community television's longest running local public affairs talk television show. And a special announcement tonight. I'm proud to announce that according to the membership of community television, and we as a team, all the various volunteers, and Charlie Phillips, the producer, all the wonderful folk who help make Voices from the Village happen, we've won an award from our membership for Best Talk Show. And it's a real honor to just be part of the team that helps make our show happen, that helps bring the voices from our community live to our airwaves every, I guess, second and fourth Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe it's first and third, who knows? Second and fourth. Anyway, again, I am Sandino Gomez, and I'm going to be your host tonight. As you saw on the opening credits, our topic tonight is going to be discussing a little bit about climate change, some of the problems contributing to climate change, particularly when we talk about current mainstream energy sources, including gasoline, petroleum, natural gas. We'll get in a little bit about the current energy systems, but we're also sitting here with a few visionaries in the alternative fuel kind of marketplace of ideas. We've got a couple local folks who are taking direct action to make alternative fuels more widely available and help make people more conscious of them. So tonight's guests, sitting to my right, starting here, we have Dave Bloom. And Dave is a local advocate for ethanol fuels and kind of looking at different systems of producing ethanol fuels locally as well as even nationally, and for a kind of alternative fuel system not based on petroleum products.
Absolutely.
Great. And then to Dave's right, we have Ray Newkirk. And Ray helps run, he's one of the co-owners of the Green Station, which is a biodiesel distribution point, also carrying various electric vehicle options, including electric cars, kind of utility trucks, and right here in front of us, as you saw perhaps during the intro, electric bicycles and electric motor scooters. So Ray is providing people alternative transportation, again, not involving the kind of petroleum complex.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sandino.
And due to technical difficulties, unfortunately, we have another guest lined up. He will be here shortly. Jeff Shuey is going to be talking to us a little bit about solar voltaic panels and kind of the options in front of people for their homes and business and retrofitting their existing structures to help produce clean, alternative energy, which perhaps isn't the best term for it, but is what...
about renewable.
Renewable energy, much better term. Clean, renewable energy right at your place of business or residence. Now, often we start with a Voices from the Street kind of segment. Unfortunately, again, due to technical difficulties, we don't have that for you tonight. But we do, one of our guests did bring in a short clip kind of introducing some of ethanol and ethanol issues. So I think we're going to start with that just to kick off the conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these short messages.
Hi there, I'm Dave Bloom. I'm the author of Alcohol Can Be a Gas and the president of the International Institute for Ecological Agriculture. And we've been working to promote alcohol fuel for over 30 years. And now we're working with the Ford Motor Company in their newest generation of vehicles that are fully alcohol capable. This Ford F-150 that we have here is a fully flex fuel vehicle that'll run on alcohol or gasoline and get pretty good mileage on both. The point of this, though, is that during the big auto bailout a few years ago, most of the companies took money from the government. Ford didn't. And on top of that, Ford promised that it would have 50% of its vehicles running on alcohol by the year 2012. Here's an example of a 2012 Ford F-150 that is ready to go right now with alcohol fuel. Fuel you can either make yourself or buy at an E85 station. If you go to our website, Alcohol Can Be a Gas, you'll find at the very top right corner a station finder, and it'll help you find where you can get alcohol fuel for a vehicle like this anywhere in the country. Now, it's a tough battle to get the change we need to see in our fuel supply. The oil companies have been writing all the history so far, and it's time for us to change history. What we would like to see you do is have your friends show this video to their friends, because we're not getting a fair shake in the mainstream medium. We'll be able to send you in that program a package of information to distribute to people, the DVD to show to your friends, and I can appear live via web to be able to answer your questions at the end of the video. For more information on our home theater project, please give us a call at 888-737-6228 or go to alcoholcanbeagas.com and look for home theater events.
There you go, folks. Right there, again, that was Dave Bloom talking about some of the ethanol possibilities available now. And so why don't we just pass the word straight to Dave so he can tell us a little bit more about what it is we saw. Dave, could you differentiate between traditional gasoline and ethanol fuel? Kind of what's the basic difference in that?
Well, first of all, alcohol is the traditional fuel and gasoline was the latecomer. All the first vehicles ran on alcohol before gasoline was ever invented. And in fact, the Model T, the Ford vehicle that was the start of the assembly line manufactured cars, was designed to run on alcohol right from the factory. So gasoline was the afterthought. And the idea that fuel should be produced by farmers, in other words, from plants growing, is an idea pretty much as old as vehicles and electrical generation in this country. So when we talk about making alcohol from plant matter, we're really talking about making it from solar energy. When the sun shines on the planet, plants eat it up. Mm-hmm. And along with it, they eat CO2 and drink water. Those three things together make carbohydrates, carbon dioxide, water as hydrate, and those we ferment, distill, and use as fuel. It couldn't be simpler. But the idea is that those fuels never run out. Unlike anything we get from the fossil fuel industry, which has a definite lifetime. For instance, there's a lot of argument right now whether we're in peak oil or not. In other words, the era that oil now is going away. Everyone in the scientific community pretty much agrees that's where we are. Mm-hmm. And by 2030, we should be down to only 10% of the production of liquid oil that we are today. And the rest of it is supposed to be made up by untapped oil reserves that we haven't found yet. So that's a lot of wishful thinking. And if we want to not be faced with the horrible toxic replacements for gasoline, like oil shale to gasoline, tar sands, which we're currently getting huge amounts from in Canada, or natural gas made into synthetic gasoline, all of these are really horrible alternatives, as we were saying earlier, not renewable, for gasoline. So alcohol is something that people can make on the small scale for less than $1 a gallon. We can make it on the commercial scale for about that. It's 98% pollution free compared to gasoline, and it does not add to atmospheric carbon dioxide, which is affecting our global atmosphere and having all kinds of unpredictable results.
Right, kind of the condition of the planet. How is ethanol superior in terms of not contributing to climate change? I mean, I guess essentially we've always used gasoline because it was more readily accessible, quote unquote. It was cheaper when it was abundant, but as we enter this era of kind of petroleum scarcity, gasoline is going to be a less attractive fuel, and perhaps alcohol is worth another look.
Yes. Well, as I was saying, when you're growing a plant to make the fuel, it absorbs CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Which is one of the greenhouse gases that's causing...
One of the several gases, yes,
right.
but that's one of the biggest quantity, billions of tons a year.
Right.
But when you burn fossil fuels, you release carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and there's nothing making fossil fuels nowadays taking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
Right.
With alcohol, we have a cycle, and the same will be true, for instance, of biodiesel, which Ray will be talking about in a moment. That's a cycle also where plants absorb the CO2 out of the air, We make the alcohol or biodiesel from it, and then when we burn it, what drives the vehicle down the road is the solar energy, and we give back the CO2 and water to the environment where it grows the next crop. So unlike fossil fuels, we have a cycle when we use a renewable fuel.
Closed loop, if you will.
Closed loop, and we only have a problem in about 4.5 billion years when the sun burns out, but I think we'll be worried about other things at that point.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be larger problems. What exactly is a flex fuel vehicle? You mentioned in the video here that Ford is now rolling out these flex fuel vehicles. What exactly are they? And maybe you could talk a little bit about E85 as well.
Sure. Basically, flex fuel means that the computer is smart enough in the vehicle to adjust the air-fuel ratio and the spark timing, in other words, the tune-up of the vehicle, to accommodate either alcohol or gasoline or any mixture of the two. And not just Ford, but almost all auto companies now make engines that have a smart enough computer to run both alcohol and gasoline. And that's really the only difference between the two, because alcohol already has oxygen in it, it needs less from the air. So making those adjustments is a simple matter of software, and it typically costs less than $50 a vehicle to make a vehicle flex fuel versus gasoline only. So we're talking about insignificant change, and the oil companies have been fighting this tooth and nail ever since the president was a senator. Senator Obama, he proposed that all the vehicles in the United States manufactured here or imported had to be flex fuel, and the oil companies stopped him time and time again from making that happen.
I could imagine. You mentioned that there's basically a mandate for vehicles. I mean, is that still standing, or has that been defeated, as you just said?
Well, our wonderful Senator Dianne Feinstein has colluded with Oklahoma State Tom Coburn to get rid of all the incentives for alcohol fuel. So when you see alcohol at the pump now as E85, like you were mentioning,
yeah,
you're seeing a fuel that has no subsidies whatsoever and is still 40 cents cheaper than gasoline. Gasoline is actually subsidized to the tune of over $5 a gallon, right. Pulling it out of our income tax in all kind of odd ways to cover up the fact that it's no longer cost effective to make gasoline or products from oil. Around the world right now, gasoline is $8, $9, $10, $15 a gallon, depending on where you are.
Talk a little bit about it's the International Institute for Ecological Agriculture, right? The organization you're a part of?
Yes, we have a couple of hats we wear. One is that the educational organization, the IIEA, but we also have Bloom Distillation, which is now about to start manufacturing equipment where people can make alcohol on the small scale. And when I say small, I'm looking at small business scale, like 100,000 gallons a year or 1 million gallons a year. And this is tiny compared to oil refineries or right. even Midwest alcohol plants that are 100 times larger. So we're working on a project right now, for instance, in Nicaragua, your namesake's country, working with the Ortega government to convert the electricity needed for the city of Managua, and we're talking about making that instead of from diesel fuel, which a lot of the electricity in the world is made with big engines and diesel fuel.
Large generators.
We're talking about converting those to alcohol, producing the alcohol from the sewage of Managua, growing crops specifically for energy production. So we see other countries other than the United States taking the lead and putting together programs for alcohol, biodiesel, other alternatives that will replace the importation of oil, which is crippling their economy.
You mentioned the large Midwest fuel plants, and I know one of the criticisms sometimes of these alternative fuels is you're taking food crops that could be feeding people and making fuel out of them to fuel first world nations' cars. But I know in your book, Alcohol Can Be a Gas, you go into how essentially corn is one of the least efficient crops that you could be making ethanol from. That essentially it's the corn lobby and all these subsidies, as you mentioned, not only in the petroleum industry, but also the agricultural sector, the Farm Bill, that kind of encourage us to overproduce corn, when perhaps there's more efficient crops that we could be using to produce ethanol as a nation, as a society. Can you talk a little bit about that controversy?
Sure, I'll keep that brief.
Yeah.
We have other things to talk about, but that's propaganda, that there's a food versus fuel issue. We feed our corn to cattle. Now, when was the last time you saw a sub-Saharan baby in Africa sitting down to a steak?
Steak dinner.
Okay, like that's just not the facts. But if you say it enough times, like, 9/11 was caused by Iraq, 9/11 was caused by Iraq, all of a sudden people think it's true. And
Certainly.
when you've got the American Petroleum Institute pouring the propaganda down our throats about renewable fuels, people don't know where they heard it, but they think it must be true. In reality, alcohol fuel increases the amount of food in the country. We had a surplus of corn before the alcohol movement started, and alcohol was developed as a way of keeping local farmers from going out of business because there was a place for the surplus corn to go, rather than breaking the backs of the farmers so that the big food corporations could make a few more pennies of profit on your cornflakes. So basically, you've got some big interest trying to convince us all that don't look at the man behind the curtain, don't look at alcohol fuel because it's something we're competing with. Even here in Santa Cruz, you can go back in history, which kind of talks a little bit about some of the things we want to mention tonight about toxic waste, where that's used as a byproduct of other fuels. At one time, the streetlights in Santa Cruz were lit by a stuff called manufactured gas. And that was oil that was converted into a gaseous product in a plant up on River Street that was able to be burned in street lamps instead of alcohol. We're like the city of Cleveland, for a minute, 18,000 bushels of corn a month to make alcohol to light its street lamps. And so the battle for renewable fuel versus gasoline or versus oil goes back even before the internal combustion engine. It goes back to lighting our streets.
Wow. And there's certainly, like I said, within your book and within the website, you do talk about various other sources. Essentially like agricultural waste that could be used for ethanol purposes.
Yeah, the world's figures on that show that there's billions of tons of food wasted per year. And this is not after the consumer gets it, like throwing it away because it went bad. This is at the farm end, the processing end, the distribution system. All of that has huge amounts of waste that are easily used for producing alcohol. We're talking about tens of billions of gallons a year of fuel that could be used without touching any cropland. But in Nicaragua, the project we're talking about processing sewage in cattail marshes. The cattails, the plant looks like a stick with a hot dog on top.
The reeds and everything, yeah.
Yeah, and so those are full of starch. And we're going to be making alcohol from those, which nobody would think of as a food product except indigenous Americans who used to eat it because it was a lot of starch in it. But not today, no one's eating cattails. And so here's a way we can solve an environmental problem and at the same time make an enormous amount of fuel, 20 times what we can get from corn in the same amount of space. So we have many clever ways of making alcohol. In fact, we have a research going on right now here in Santa Cruz where we are converting kelp into alcohol. And of course, we would never think of touching the kelp that's naturally growing near the shore. But in China and other places further out in deeper water, there are kelp nets where the kelp is attached to nets that are growing near the surface, making an enormous amount of habitat for krill and other creatures, which of course are the basic food for our whales that go up and down the coast. And of course, take all the carbon dioxide out of the water and make sugary products that we can then make alcohol from. So we're working on several fronts that are not looking at using land for fuel, but looking at huge quantities from other sources.
Sounds like there's tons of other potential sources for ethanol, and we shouldn't look at this as a food versus fuel.
Well, like we're going to talk about biodiesel in a moment. There's diatoms, for instance, which are pretty much microscopic little kind of plants, but they can be up to 50% oil, and those could be grown in sewage too. So we can look at many solutions to the fuel thing using waste and making an enormous amount of fuel.
We certainly generate plenty of waste in this country.
We're good at that.
We're good at that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, and again, it's Alcohol Can Be a Gas. People can go there for more information about the book and about kind of some of your work and any other websites that people should be checking out or other sources of information.
Is our main website, and we also should have news, cross our fingers, within a month of securing a place in Santa Cruz County where we'll actually have a demonstration center where we're not only growing crops for alcohol and making the alcohol, but all the byproducts that are food that you can make from the leftovers from the alcohol process. We're really excited by this because we've been looking for years to set up this demonstration center, and we now have an offer in on some property to do just that. So we're really looking forward to, making Santa Cruz the center of the universe about creativity and innovation around biofuels.
That's great. That's awesome. That's good. Definitely some good news. Yeah. Well, Ray, we'll talk with Dave a minute here. Why don't we switch gears and, as he mentioned, talk a little bit about biodiesel. Maybe you could just start with a little overview about what it is, how it's different from traditional diesel, and kind of what are you doing with it?
Well, sure. I mean, I want to say one thing. First off, kudos to Dave, for I know he's been putting his time in on this since like the early 70s. And, there's a lot of research that's gone on, and he's been driving it. And I'm really grateful. A lot of what I learned about biodiesel, I learned from Dave, actually, things about, the Model T. And what Dave always liked to say is that how that was digital air fuel mixture, because they had a knob on the dashboard and a lever on the on the steering column that would allow you to manipulate the air fuel mixture with your hands in order to go back and forth between gas and
in other words, your 5 digits. Yes.
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah.
And
Sounds
so,
easy.
Yeah, there's so many things we can be doing that we don't have to be burning petroleum, and biodiesel is another one of them. And I thank you for bringing up the food versus fuel issue too, because there are wrong ways to do everything.
Certainly.
But there are right ways to do them too. And
There's no requirement for us to stay stupid.
good point. Good point. Yeah.
So what's the difference between biodiesel and traditional diesel?
Okay, well,
For those that-
biodiesel
just
is
to
made from
update
straight
people.
vegetable oil,
Okay.
and the biodiesel in this country is largely made from soy, but that's largely because we grow a lot of soy for feed stocks, for growing livestock as well, and so they have to de-oil the feeds that they give to the cattle and pigs and all that. in order to be
Especially
able
the
to coat-
pigs. You don't want to be around pigs eating whole soybeans. It's not something to consider mentally, I'll tell you.
Oh.
So you got to get the oil out.
Yeah. So so they're using it largely to make biodiesel with, and there are other ways to do that too.
I was
Everything
going to
that we
ask what
sell
other
at the
sources are there.
Yeah, well, at the Green Station, everything we have ever sold there has been from recycled oil from restaurant fryers.
Oh, wow.
So it's a waste product basically at that point. There are other things that the tallow companies do with it, that they make cosmetics and and put it back into animal feeds for dog foods and all kinds of other things that certain amounts of it go back in. You do have to have a certain amount of oil in the foods, but everything we have, like I said, is a waste product. And-
Where does the biodiesel come from? I've seen the trucks bringing it in before. Where's
Well,
it?
we have a gentleman in our company who owns his own truck, and he brings all our fuel to us. And there are a couple of places we get it from in the Bay Area, and it mostly comes from Oakland. We get a little bit from as far away as Ukiah or Chilkoot. There are several small producers that are in the state of California.
Well, you
And-
can't get more local than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be a little more local than, when we were making it in my backyard, that was a little more local, but we couldn't sell that stuff, you have to have, everything has to be ASTM certified, so, you have to go through a major certification process and constant testing, and, we weren't about to do that from my backyard, When we
Certainly.
started this off, it was 1999 was when I made my first batch of biodiesel, and, I just had 3 people running their cars on it, myself and the carpenter who was working with me at that point, who told me about biodiesel, he and I and my wife, and that was it. So we went that way for about 2 years until we, I thought about, well, this is really great for 3 people, but what about everybody else? So then I started researching how do we actually go about selling biodiesel legally. And at that point, we started purchasing it from a company over in San Jose who was importing it, and it was mostly soy at that point. It's all a great step in the direction of renewables, and those are the steps we need to be taking to get us off of petroleum, which is causing all kinds of damage, as we know. Now, one other thing I wanted to say too about, I'm glad you brought that up, the tax subsidies too, because Dave said that it's over $5 a gallon. The taxpayers are subsidizing every gallon of gasoline. It's actually, there's a lot of studies out there who say it's a lot more than that too. And one of them that I love to quote, because it's by Milton Kopoulos, who is no longer with us, but he was an economic advisor for Reagan. He did a study in 2004 and revamped it in 2006. And you know, as an economic advisor for Reagan, you know that he's no liberal, veggie burning, bleeding heart guy who's just trying to save the planet. He's just looking at dollars and cents and what makes sense economically. And so he said, when you take into consideration all the military that keeps the Straits of Hormuz open, and he made a point of saying this does not include war. This is just all the military that's there just to make sure that the boats can keep going through. That, and there are direct subsidies. There were a number of states back then that didn't charge drilling fees for oil companies who are drilling on public land. Now California is the only company, or the only company,
state,
the company
right?
of California that's not charging drilling fees for petroleum companies.
Thanks to Chevron.
Yeah.
And its huge donations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's and this just recently came out in the last couple of months that in the mainstream media now they've admitted that diesel exhaust causes cancer. Gee, we didn't know that, did we, Dave? But,
Some of us didn't know.
Yeah, right. But so there's a lot of that's on the back of taxpayers for people who don't have insurance, and they get their treatments covered by Medicaid and Medi-Cal, and things like the Deepwater Horizon that blew up. Just that one rig alone, BP was claiming $125,000 a day tax credit for the rent that they paid to the company who owns the rig. And that's one out of thousands of drilling rigs. So you add all that stuff up, and he said by the end of 2006, we were already paying $11 a gallon. And that was back when gas was about $2.75. So it's just gotten nothing but worse and worse since then.
And the trick is it comes out of your tax dollars and my tax dollars, but not businesses' tax dollars. So we subsidize fuel so that the oil companies can sell it to American corporations who can have an artificially low price for energy while we, the citizens, pay the tab. But in politics, you brought up a good thing about the whole idea of diesel being toxic, of course, being in every school bus that's out there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And kids are sitting there while the bus is idling, picking up the next bunch of kids. It's already been shown that those horrible carcinogens get in the buses. I want to say that local politician, Karen Osmondson, who's rerunning for her seat.
Colorado Valley Unified School District.
Yes, she's advocating for biodiesel and alcohol-powered school buses as part of her campaign. And she's she's representative of a whole new group of politicians that are visionary and saying, we need to, from the ground up, make our local governments, our school districts, our economies represent our values for renewability, no toxicity, and truly taking care of our kids into the future, rather than some of the drivel we hear on certain political persuasions talk radio.
Right. Well, I'm really glad you brought up the school buses too for a few reasons, because there are studies too that show
a good story there, right?
That the emissions inside the bus are actually more toxic than they are outside the bus, because you look at school districts, they're usually very underfunded, so they're driving old tanks of buses around. These old giant Detroit diesels. Yeah, they're very bad. And they've got floorboards that leak. The exhaust pipes may not be 100%. All that stuff is going inside the bus, and so I've read a number of studies over the years that say that the air quality inside the bus versus sitting out next to the bus, or the kids sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus,
can be worse.
It's worse inside than it is outside.
And the solution is so simple. Rather than try to fix, petroleum diesel burning with putting devices on the exhaust pipe and this and the other thing, it's like, just give it up. It's the wrong stuff to burn. We just need to go to these cleaner fuels so that we don't have those problems anymore. I recently got involved in a share on a little sailboat up in Sausalito. And the first thing I did is I went and bought some biodiesel from Ray to put in the little one-cylinder diesel in this boat, and it was a night and day difference in the exhaust. I mean, the black, horrible stuff that comes out of the back of that diesel engine that goes into the bay, because water exhaust, it's like gone. Using the biodiesel, because the carbon content of the exhaust is less than half. All the black sooty stuff. So And the other thing is that the
Smells good when it's in the air.
Well,
it
I'm a
actually smells
vegetarian,
good.
and if it smells like hamburgers, it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
You know,
French fries.
But French
Well,
fries,
French fries,
Tempura. Smells like
tempura.
tempura.
Yeah.
All right.
But it also cleans out the fuel tank in a
Right.
boat, which is really important because in a marine environment, which we live in Santa Cruz,
A lot of corrosion.
well, moisture gets in the
Yeah.
tank when it expands, it contracts, and that moisture gets down in the bottom of the tank and makes this horrible mix like mayonnaise in the bottom of the tank, which eventually causes trouble. But with alcohol, we never have that. Alcohol is
Burns
completely,
cleaner.
well, it's soluble with water. So when you want to
Right.
get the water out of gasoline, you just put some alcohol in the tank and it absorbs the water and mixes it with the gasoline.
Mixes
you can
it.
get rid of it. Or in the case of biodiesel, we can wash all that sludge that's formed in the bottom of the tank because biodiesel is such a good solvent. And so we can clean up our current vehicles quite a bit by using these alternative fuels.
You know, it's been shown too that the emissions of the biodiesel are so much lower that, like we have a friend who runs Sanctuary Whale Watch cruises out of Monterey, and this has been going on for a while down there. He bought the boat from a gentleman who used to run biodiesel in it too, and Michael's still running biodiesel in it. But they were showing that people were getting less seasickness on them because they were getting
Right.
breathing this horrible diesel
Less
exhaust, and it
noxious
makes
fumes.
their stomach upset, and it's just a really a smart way to go about it, and the
Well, it's a
boats
merit-
run great on it.
It's a maritime tradition. It used to be the worst job on a boat was galley slave, right? Going down and cooking the food for everyone. Because I used to cook on diesel stoves. So here you are below deck, and you're breathing all these diesel fumes. Oh my God, everybody would get seasick. For 100 or more years now, in galley stoves on boats have been mostly alcohol because there is no emissions.
Right.
And that's so important when it comes to people's homes. Because instead of diesel, most people in the world, and by most people I mean 50% of the world, billions of people,
Right.
cook over an open fire indoors. They're either using kerosene stoves, which is like diesel, or they're using wood, which is choking everybody, causing more childhood deaths than any other cause in the developing world, and 2 million women a year die from breathing wood smoke. So one of the things that we're doing with alcohol fuel is providing inexpensive stoves to people in little huts around the world, like in Ethiopia, in the Amazon, and other places, so they don't have to cut wood and burn it to cook their food. I mean, you can't blame somebody for deforesting if they're cooking, right? It's like one thing to make profit from lumber, but
People have to do what they have to do to survive.
right, and alcohol is pollution-free, causes none of the problems of wood cooking, and eliminates deforestation. So, you know, although a lot of talk is about what to use for fuel for our vehicles, there are billions of people who need to replace
Cooking
their
is a
cooking
serious,
fuel,
yeah,
and in that way, alcohol is really important.
Great. Before we switch over to Jeff here, Ray, if you could tell us just a little bit about the Green Station, where can people find more information? Where can people find the Green Station? Where can
Well,
they
we're
find
at-
more information?
we're at-
And what else do you offer besides biodiesel at the Green Station?
Okay,
And
we're
maybe
at-
you could explain what this is in front of the table here, but just one at a time, one at a time.
Sure. Well, we are at 433 Ocean Street in Santa Cruz. It's a corner of Ocean and SoCal. We've been there as the Green Station for almost 5 years now, and I had a company before that. We were there for about a year and a half. Testing the waters. That company didn't quite work out, but we resurrected it with the help of one of our biodiesel customers from Pacific Biofuel. Helped buy some of the stuff out of bankruptcy so we could continue with the new company that we put together.
Great.
We have a
Still there then.
yeah. And so we also sell electric. Neighborhood electric vehicles. We haven't had any good ones in recently, though. We did represent Zen Motors for quite a while and sold a bunch of them, but they went out of business because this is a hard market to make a living in.
Certainly.
But what we sell mostly, as far as electrics go, are these bicycles out here.
Right here.
Those
It's like
are,
the electric motors in the back, or is that the battery or the motor? or
there's
which
a
is
motor
which?
and a battery.
Okay,
back
so
there.
the black case is the battery.
That's right.
correct? And then the motor is the silver hub behind the.
Yeah, that's a little external motor on the back.
Okay.
They do make hub motors too that are a tiny bit better
Internal.
balanced than this, but they cost a little bit more too. This bike
Right.
is only $550.
Wow.
And they're great for getting around town. They climb hills well. It's a nice boost. You don't want to be trying to climb a hill with nothing but the power of the motor. But if you're driving along while you're pedaling and then you kick that into gear, it's a great boost. I mean, the first nice hill I climbed on it was going up, Pogonip up UCSC, that long hill up there. There was a bicyclist on the halfway up the hill. When I hit the bottom of the hill, I passed him before we got to the top. And after that, I was kind of like, well, I kind of like these bikes. Because I was skeptical at first. I'm a bike rider. I've been riding my bike all over the place. And I was like, well, why would I want a motor? But after I realized that after having these for about a month, every time I got on a bike, I was getting on one of these, I realized, oh yeah, these are pretty nice. So,
I realize that what we're looking at here is the evolution of the moped from back in the 80s,
right,
which looked a little more like a motorcycle and a little bit less like a bike, but it was the same thing. You had to pedal with the motor.
Well, but
going
really what those were about, though, is that was just like giving you a kickstart once you, because that's where the biggest drain on a battery
is the initial zero to like 20 or whatever, yeah.
So if you give it a few kicks on the pedals, I mean, we've sold a number of those electric moped type vehicles there too, and that's what they're for. If you try to pedal that, they have really kind of short crank on them, and you can't really pedal that thing very far. You'll wear your knees on the heartbeat. Right, but in order to get you off the line, that's what those pedals were really there for.
Of course, those the old mopeds. I used to have one that I used to run on alcohol, and I used to think, well, if I ever switched to my bike, I could run that on alcohol too. But of course, that would require a little challenge to navigation. Of course,
I remember seeing you up at the Soul Fest and taking a big chug off a 151 and then pouring it into the tank of the motorcycle. The tank will driving away on it.
Yeah, we wanted to show people that it's the very same alcohol that people have been making for thousands of years and drink. It's
using for various purposes.
Well, the point is, it's not toxic. It's edible.
Right. Literally.
But our main function at the Green Station is really selling biodiesel.
Okay.
We sell everything from small Volkswagens, a lot of older Mercedes, to big trucks of all shapes and sizes, and the emissions are about 85% lower than they are on petrodiesel. And it extends engine life because the lubricity is far superior. Even you think places like Minnesota, where they mandated 2% biodiesel in the fuel there for two reasons. They grow a lot of canola there. They want to encourage their farmers to make biodiesel there, but also it extends engine life. So even with just 2%, it's doubles the lubricity. And now that we have an ultra low sulfur diesel, is the D2 petroleum diesel now. Sulfur was the main lubricant in that, so engines aren't lasting as long as they used to with diesels. So this is a great replacement.
Interesting.
Alcohol too triples engine life, but I was looking at Jeff over here, who slipped in when nobody was watching.
Right. Why don't we, before we introduce Jeff here, this is a live show, and we do want to invite you to call in with your questions. I believe the number is appearing on your screen right now as I'm speaking. So if you'd like to call in, of course, it's 425-8844 if you want to ask a question of Ray or Dave. But before we accept any calls, why don't we introduce our other guest who has overcome the technical difficulties and arrived to talk to us about his particular area of expertise, which, if I understand correctly, is solar voltaic panels. And we're talking about climate change and kind of some of the contributing factors, but then we're also especially focusing on alternatives to kind of traditional energy sources. Renewable energies. Renewable energies, yes.
Gasoline was the alternative, the wrong alternative.
The wrong alternative, certainly.
Yeah, so I've been involved in installing and designing and building solar electric systems for houses and businesses since '99 initially, and then before that I was doing off-grid systems. So I have a lot of experience in the solar end of it, managing projects, inspecting projects. I worked for SunPower, et cetera. And now I just do it as an independent consultant. But yeah, my vision's always been that we don't need to use fossil fuels. We can use the direct sunlight of the sun to fuel our society. And in all renewables everywhere, you have wind as well. You have all these technologies are quite advanced now, and really the only thing stopping them from moving full tilt into dominating the energy market is the corporate system that we have currently, that currently wants to
has its cash cow on lockdown and doesn't want to share the pie.
Right, exactly.
That's mixed metaphors, but
I'm mixing the metaphors, but I guess I'm just hungry. Sorry.
But that biodiesel did it for you.
But it has advanced significantly
151.
in the last, decade. California is pushing itself back into the forefront of this photovoltaic revolution.
How are they doing that exactly?
Well, Jerry Brown, got this thing through where 33% of energy that the state has would come from renewables, and of course solar is a big one of that, and so there's these big, large megawatt units that are going down in the desert and stuff. 250 megawatts here, 250 megawatts there. Pretty soon you're talking a nuclear power plant, right? So a nuclear power plant is, typically they run in the 300 to 600.
What's a typical home system usually?
Well, home systems are of course much smaller. We have one, it's 3.5 kilowatts. So it's much, much smaller.
So a megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts, right?
Yeah.
So how many homes could you? I mean, that's a lot of homes that could be powered from 250
With the numbers,
megawatts.
25,000 or something like
right.
that. Yeah.
We're talking not insignificant.
So Moss Landing is, I think it's close to 2 megawatts, I believe.
Those nuclear power plants, though,
2,000 megawatts. I mean.
They're not as people get the idea that they're this enormous source of power that reaches way out. And if you take a look at San Onofre, it only powers about 1.5 million homes, but when it blows, it'll kill 7.5 million people.
Yeah,
so
well,
the risk to power ratio, you might say, of nuclear power isn't all that rosy. And of course, we have this small issue with radiation from Fukushima that we're all having to deal with now.
Right.
And when one of those goes, it could be a world-ending event. Now, this electric bike, if you just plug it into the wall, it's probably getting its power from nuclear or coal. But if you plug it into one of Jeff's systems, then it's, of course, being powered by the sun. Or if you're using an alcohol-powered generator, the same way. So more of those things can piggyback on the electrical revolution that Jeff is working on, so that we're able to make more market for renewable electricity.
Well, California, though, is more hydro and natural gas than coal or nuclear.
Yeah,
But that brings up
Just
another
the same.
issue. How are we getting our natural gas to, and what are we doing to our streams and rivers by damming them? And we want to start fracking in our backyards here in order to poison our water supplies, and in order to get the natural gas that we need to power our power plants. And
so there's a real push by the fossil fuel industry to keep their stuff going. So if it's natural gas, which of course burns clean, et cetera, but they're not really, and they're saying how much of a stimulant it is to the local economy, but it's the same kind of boom-bust economy that we've always had. It will be only, it will only be useful for a period of time, and then the fracking resources, the resources that you get from fracking will disseminate.
Well, once they frack an area, they move on.
Yeah,
it's not like these projects
and this
are there
is the cool
permanent
thing about
sources of
solar.
jobs. These
is
are
it's
temporary.
constantly renewable. There's no way that until the thing dies, which I think is a couple billion years from now, at least that's what they're saying. Which is okay for me, because that means that. So in reality, there's such a simple, stupid solution for all these problems, and yet we continue to be very complex, have these fancy fracking technology, or the nuclear power industry, which prides itself on how clever they are and how they're so safe. But what we need is just a simple answer. And solar is the simple answer. One of the simple answers. There's a whole mix of things. But we need, in order to do that, we need to get the we need to have the political power in there, pushing and making it clear. And Jerry Brown's doing quite a bit of that, and Schwarzenegger did some of it too as well. Not to say that Schwarzenegger had anything else going for him except that, but whatever. There's a lot to be encouraged about, but then at the same time, it's such a constant battle of getting it clear. They're building 2 nukes right now in Georgia. I think,
right,
Georgia.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
The thing is, though, Jeff, I agree with you that it's a constant battle, but I think the way we win is not by being in battle, because, quite frankly, the oil companies have better guns. They have the money, they have the power, they have the politicians bought. So, trying to fight in their arena with politics, with representatives, we are at a big disadvantage. I think the way we win is, instead of fighting, is we just step aside. In other words, what you do, what Ray does, what I do, is we provide a way where you don't have to spend your money on these horrible so-called alternative fuels, these gasolines, these diesels, these, fracking, et cetera. If we say, no, you're not going to get my money, there's a powerful statement of that, because we live in capitalism. Yeah. And if you don't give them your capital, then they shrivel up and blow away. And you don't have to deplete them of all the money they have. You only have to slow their growth a little bit. And if they are slowed down just a couple of percent, well, then everybody who's buying their stock goes, I'll put my money in something that's making more, and they can implode. We don't actually have to destroy the oil companies or the utility companies. We only have to slow them down, and they'll collapse. How do we do that? Is that we go ahead and start decentralizing power production, like you're doing, or making alcohol on the farm, or biodiesel from the farm also. We started doing that, and now different people are getting the money, and those people are aligned with the public.
Great. Well, looks like we have a question from our studio audience here, so why don't we cut live to our extended guest balcony here.
Hi, I'm Betsy Phillips. I had a question for Jeff. Jeff, how much does it usually cost to get your house outfitted with solar? And is that something you can do at your apartment if you don't own the building?
Well, ownership of the building is critical. That you have to have an agreement with your landlord that you can do it. That's important. But as far as a house goes, your average home these days, you need between 3 and 5 kilowatts, depending on your energy usage. And so that these days the cost of these systems is in the $5 a watt range, though it's even going down below that. And if you do it yourself, or if you talk to me, I'll help you do it for cheaper. But so a house could run anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000, depending on the size of the house, of course. A small house, like our place we have a 3.5 system. But you can do phases of it. You can do it in phases now. So you can do 50% of the power that you're using, or you can do, 25% of the power you're using this year, so much smaller outlay. And then you add modules later. So you can do as much as you can afford.
And once you have it hooked up, is it like free power after that?
Well, no, it's a deal where you feed into the grid. So the grid that's owned by that wonderful group called Pacific Gas and Electric, our favorite utility, thank you very much. They control the meter, and it might be even smart these days, right?
It's a whole other talk show.
They control the meter, and so the solar simply pumps into that meter and reverses it, makes it go backwards. And so you're using the grid as a battery system. So we don't have batteries. In the old days, we had battery systems that would, you still can get those, but those were more expensive and less efficient. So what people these days do, get a very simple system that pumps right into the grid and produces anywhere between, whatever percentage of power you want. It could be you could have almost a zero, but they're always going to charge you for the meter. They're going to charge you the $7 or $8 a month for the meter.
And Jeff, isn't it true that if you put in more power than you use, then they just get to keep that power and sell it?
That has been the agreement that was made back in '99, but I hear there's, on the commercial level, there's changes to that occurring. But I'm not actually up to date on that. But nowadays, if you're a big business, you can come in and say, hey, I want to be paid for my power. But the net metering thing made it so that you just do, you produce whatever you make. And if you produce more, at the end of the year, they true it up and they say, well, thank you very much. You just gave us an extra megawatt hour of power. Thank you very much, and it's a good deal. But Well, so what we usually do is we size the systems to do a percentage of it.
Right.
So that's what you do typically. Yeah.
In the case of alcohol, they don't let us do that. We can have an alcohol generator, as some of our Northern California customers have for their large wattage uses in their indoor or agricultural enterprises. And, you know, getting big ideas is they want to put power back in the grid with their alcohol powered generator. And they're not allowed to do that, even though it only costs, you know, less than 50 cents a watt to put in an alcohol generator and generate power. But of course, you're not generating the power on site, you're bringing in the power in the form of alcohol from, you know, a truck like Ray's that delivers fuel. But, you know, you get the benefits of no emissions and all that kind of thing, but you don't get to put any of it against your bill like you can with solar panels.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cogeneration, and then wind generators too as well, and different, but it's all about, again, the political power of the industry that you're in. Like right now, the solar industry has some, excuse me, some political power, so they're able to, you know, use some of that in the various, you know, in the halls of Congress or in the halls of the state legislature. So that's really what it boils down to, is like, okay, well, you know, if the alcohol industry had some, you know, enough power, I mean, on that level. And they have a lot of power. The alcohol industry.
You know, Jeff, we do have that power on that level, and
so we can hire me as a lobbyist. I'll go and I'll talk to all these
so
guys.
let me tell you what happens
cheap.
if your industry gets bigger. You'll have the same problem as the alcohol industry, which is the oil companies will decide you're bothersome.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
Public
now-
enemy number one. Public
Right,
energy number one.
So as Sandino brought up earlier in the show, we were talking about the whole myth of food versus fuel, which is strictly an oil company attack on alcohol.
Exactly.
But pretty soon, Jeff, if you start getting more popular with what you're doing and the price comes down so more people can afford it, then they'll start saying, poor people in China need water and electricity, and you're using the copper that they need to get water to their house, you see.
Yeah.
And so you're a bad person, and you know your whole industry is evil because you're attacking people's right to free, clean water instead of disease. You can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
okay?
well,
And that's-
Demonization of any
That's
renewable,
true.
really.
And that's what's happening with alcohol.
You know, you vilify the ones who are going to actually provide the real solution. They get character assassinated. For instance, they could easily character assassinate me. You know, I don't know how they could just do it real quickly. I'm sure, but they could do that, or they could do any number of things. And these folks that run these industries will do whatever it takes to keep us in the place we are. Now, in order to break out of that consciousness, though, we have to appeal to a large population of people who will say, hey, I like what this does. And so, like you say, how do you do that? Well, it's you create the alternative yourself. We create the alternative to, you know, the main program. And we create it in all different kinds of ways. And that's our job, really, is just to create the alternative we know is there.
Right, and there's so many benefits to this. You know, there are economic benefits too. Communities that you're supporting yourself through all of this stuff. I mean, all of these decentralized power production facilities. You're not sending all your money over to, you know, Iraq or the Middle East or Mexico or Canada for shale or any place else. It's all staying right in the community. Right. Like we were saying earlier with biodiesel, you know, it's all collected from restaurants in the Bay Area and the Monterey Bay Area, and you know, mostly produced in Oakland. That's a very small footprint compared to, you know, humongous barges going back and forth between, you know, the Middle East in here, and you know, giant explosions in Chevron factories in Martinez and all that. You don't have any of that stuff with something like biodiesel. It's the same kind of thing with solar and alcohol. You know, of course, you know, it's explosive. Things can happen, but it's. Yeah, it's
I have an uncle who
much
gets
safer.
flammable when he drinks a lot.
Yeah, I believe it. I used to do that too.
You're drinking the 151, certainly.
But you know, the thrust of what you're saying and what you're saying, Jeff, is that being small is an advantage. We don't draw the fire like the big alcohol plants do that produce 100 million gallons a year or whatever. By doing local replacements, all of a sudden all your customers, they can tell their friends, oh, I'm running on biodiesel. And they tell 20 of their friends. And so it doesn't take too many small examples to infuse a community with the desire for renewables. But if you try to come in from the top, like I tried to do a national television show back in 1981 on alcohol fuel and how to make it. And we got all the way up to the point where it was on the air, and Chevron picked up the phone and said, we thought PBS, you liked our money. What's the problem here?
Right.
And so they shut down the show. They stopped the distribution of
Yeah.
the show and the printing of my book, which, I was so negligent as an author not to bring today.
That's unfortunate. And you know what else is
That's
really
a nice
unfortunate?
book too. It's the Bible on alcohol.
I've seen it. It's a
really
thick.
fat.
It's a thick thing. It's available at the Green Station. In fact,
It
Alcohol
is,
Can
it
Be a
is.
Gas, the book, the Bible of ethanol fuels, is available at the Green Station. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we have basically ran out of time. It's amazing how quick
That
an hour
was
can go.
fast.
It's amazing how quick an hour can go. I want to thank you, all three of you, for bringing your expertise to the table and just kind of joining in this discussion, being a part of, again, community television's award-winning talk show,
Hey,
Voices
Charlie.
from the Village. A big round of applause for Charlie
Yeah.
Phillips.
All right.
For all of the staff, for all of the volunteers, for all of the people here, the people that are behind the camera, in the sound booth, in the director's chair, all the people that help make Voices from the Village happen, I want to say thank you. And on behalf of all of them, thank you for watching communitytelevision.org, communitytv.org, You can find out more information about our station. You can watch our shows archived online. Thank you all very much for joining us again. And I'd just like to encourage all of you out there to be sure to investigate your own renewable energy revolution and see what you can do to lessen your impact on our rapidly declining environment and climate crisis.